Well, welcome to the next edition of Business Law Focus. It's great to welcome Dion Masher, Executive in the Employment Practice in E&S Africa, to the show today. Dion has recently spoken at the SASLAW annual conference, one of the big conferences for labor law, a really interesting event. It's just finished, and his topic was really intriguing. It's about redefining employment for the gig economy. And now this is a big ticket item. It's something that we're all watching closely, but we're concerned about. We are concerned that South Africa and Africa is not necessarily keeping up, not doing enough to facilitate the employment side of this equation as businesses themselves make significant changes, and employers, and employees that are not keeping up are going to be left behind. But what's needed is the labor law to also make the necessary changes ahead of time. So, Dion, thanks very much for joining us. And I just wanted to start SASLAW itself. I mean, a big conference. We had all big speakers in the country there. Maybe just give us a sense of what the main themes were at the conference and what really stood out for you, and then we'll get into this theme of yours of the gig economy.
Thank you, Evan. Yes, it's an annual event, one for labor lawyers, trade unionists, and HR and IR people involved in labor law in our country. And it's, as you said, it's one of the bigger ones for that constituency. And interestingly for me, it's a 2-day conference. And we had speakers that dealt with a variety of issues. What stood out for me was having two important advocates and senior advocates who you have, and we've all seen at the commission, the Zondo Commission, Advocate Myberg and Advocate Kate Hofmeyer, and they gave talks around corruption and how labor law and can deal with, and how employers should deal with corruption, specifically with reference to what was coming out at the commission. And I found that interesting, because what I took away from that was that we all, as citizens of this country, whether we are lawyers or trade unionists or HR people or executives, we need to do the right thing. And that's what I took out of it.
Yeah, no, that's critical. I think that's fabulous that everyone can do more. And I think the legal profession itself, there's a lot more to do when it comes to this. We've recently seen, obviously, SA being fingered for, anti-money laundering and not doing enough. So I think it's a critical theme. And if we can all look to do more, I think that's the way forward in professional capacities. You can't just say, well, it's the government's job. So I think that's fabulous. We're seeing a lot of this come out at Zondo, as you mentioned. So I think that's critical. But now just to move on. Your theme, of course, is the big one, which is how do we accelerate growth? How do we get to this fourth industrial revolution, maximize the outcomes, create jobs? I mean, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? We've got unemployment at record lows, but your sense, of course, is that we're a little bit behind the curve in SA at the moment when it comes to the legislation, the supportive processes that are needed to facilitate growth in this economy. And I just wanted to start, for instance, with a number like Canada, is if we don't do anything now, we will be behind the curve, because there you've got 10% of the workforce already in the gig economy. This is huge. I mean, this is coming, right? So how far behind that curve are we, and what's needed to be done?
Yeah, so we are behind the curve in terms of numbers when you compare us to Canada. The latest numbers that I can tell you that my research has uncovered is that currently we've got around 30,000 workers engaged in location-based platform work. So, people that are either doing driving type work, delivery, cleaning, etc. And another 100,000 people involved in working online. So sitting in front of their computers and working online. So that's where we are in terms of numbers, but growing every day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's critical. I agree. And the labor legislation itself. I mean, what do you see there specifically that's needed? I mean, we've had a lot of labor amendments, but not really that much yet to facilitate this area of the market, right?
We haven't had any. So our labor laws, in my view, they're very good. They've got them since 1996, so they're very new, and our courts, again, in my view, have been very good at purposefully interpreting our laws so that we attempt to cover most of the issues that we face.
Yeah.
But we are behind in respect of our laws dealing with the gig economy and the people involved in the gig economy. And so we need, in my view, one of two things, or maybe both. One, the legislature to start changing the legislation so that it caters for people involved in the gig economy, or two, our judges and our courts continuing to interpret what we currently have purposefully so that we can cater for those people involved in the gig economy.
And of course, how you define a worker becomes very important. I know in Australia, it's quite clear where they see these workers in the gig economy as independent contractors rather than employees. That's just an example. In South Africa, we a little bit unclear as well, right?
We are, but we will, and we have followed a similar route in attempting to classify people involved in the gig economy. So we haven't had in South Africa too many cases that allow for proper development, in my view, of the jurisprudence. But we do have in our law a distinction between employees, and employees is a defined term in terms of our legislation, and there are protections obviously given to employees in our legislation. We then have independent contractors who are different from employees and do not get employee protections. And the question then is, the people involved in the gig economy are clearly doing work. So I call them workers. And where do they fall? So currently, they could really they're certainly not employees. In my view, they're not independent contractors. They are workers. And so we need to be catering for them.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Interesting question, definitely. And needs to be resolved. Now, this gig economy, you've got artificial intelligence, bots coming in, obviously the cloud, the fourth industrial revolution is happening as we speak. But now, how do we actually cater for that? Like, and there I'm specifically looking at a robot coming in, taking your job. I would assume that, if it is going to improve that business, you're allowed to do it as an employer, but it's difficult terrain, right? Do you think that more needs to be done to facilitate this process and ensure that we have a little bit more clarity on, how do we protect the workforce and the labor market in this type of environment?
So, Evan, let me answer by taking a thread I mentioned earlier that for me stood out at the conference, and that was this concept of doing the right thing. You are correct. Our law recognizes an employer's ability to effectively retrench workers and replace them with machines. That our law recognizes. But there's no obligation in law necessarily for an employer, for example, to upskill or to get workers to be able to deal with working with machines. So, in my view, again, we should be looking at how that so that we are able to retain as many employees as we can, so that we don't have the huge unemployment rates we have, and we can make a dent into reducing that huge unemployment figure.
Yep. That makes sense. And just to get back to the point on independent contractors, there was recently a big decision in the UK. Of course, as you said, we don't have that much precedent at all. Certainly don't have the rules. But the precedent in the UK was specific to Uber drivers. How does that translate into SA? Does it give us any guidance?
I think it does. So Uber have had a dispute in South Africa where drivers attempted to take Uber to task in respect of whether they were employees or not, and the employees failed on the basis that they were not employees. Similarly, that happened in the UK, and specifically with Uber London, and that case went through all of the necessary fora available to employees there, culminating in a decision of the UK Supreme Court in February this year. And again, interestingly, the UK legislation caters and distinguishes between employees and workers. And the UK court found that Uber drivers, because of certain facts that were present in terms of the evidence before the court, they were workers and they were entitled to some of the protections that workers are entitled to under that legislation. So I think certainly that will act as guidance and precedent in the disputes that are most definitely going to follow in our country.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to look at, investors. They want to see a country that facilitates this type of growth, that is advanced, is accelerating in the right areas, embracing fourth industrial quite quickly, has workers that are capable, to work in that field. And, countries like India, Russia are making amendments, in our emerging market space. I mean, is there a risk that we could lose this type of investment flow if we don't get this right?
Absolutely. Investors want to get the best value for their investment. If we're not competitive when it comes to our labor market, I think it's common sense that an investor will go where they are able to get value. So I think we need to catch up, Evan. I think we're too far behind and we need to catch up.
Wonderful. Dion, fabulous. Been great chatting to you. It's such an interesting theme, such a theme that is relatable to everyone at the moment, because we're all faced with technology, with advancement in technology, with challenges and potentially threats, if we don't keep up to our own job security. So, this is a really critical question that affects everyone out there. And thanks for that input, and really some very clear, concise views on what's needed, Dion. Thanks very much. Great chatting to you.